All right. Episode 26, Rebel Therapy Podcast. I am broadcasting from Niagara on the Lake today. Little mini road trip for myself. That's also the shaky camera work. I think that me being here leads into our topic, and I don't even know how to say it, but almost like a tension between opposing desires. This time of year, maybe wanting to hibernate or isolate or be on your own, at the same time really wanting to be part of community. And since we are living in Toronto, there is an opportunity to step into at least a fleeting sense of community almost anywhere you go. So there's a real tension between the two. And I say this as somebody who has literally driven 2 hours away from her house to sit in a different room and be alone. And I'm so here for it.
Yeah, it's like a more chosen type of isolation, like when you're alone at home, it's kind of like this is my default, as opposed to
Yeah.
being like, I'm gonna go somewhere new, be in a new environment, and not be around all my stuff.
Even like I got here a couple hours ago, my room wasn't ready. So I went and had lunch. I sat in a restaurant at the bar amongst people, but read my book. So it's again that sort of perfect balance. I didn't necessarily want to be completely alone. I just didn't want to talk to anyone. So I got the energy and the vibes from being around other people doing their thing or whatever, but I could also sit in my own little space and just keep to myself. It was amazing.
I definitely resonate with that about being in a city. I'm an introvert, so I do like spending time alone, but I like having such quick access to people, and to like be out in the world doing my own thing, being around people and having those fleeting moments of community. I have a dog, I'm in the park a lot, I have a lot of dog friends, and that's a good core community for me. And because it's very low stakes, and you just kind of run into people and then you're like going different ways and you're just like, okay, great. There's no kind of commitment about it, but there's a sense of belonging as well. For me, that's always the communities I've been able to sustain are the ones that contact are is possible, but they're not going to hold me too tightly. I can come and go as I please.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what you've said really beautifully articulates the balance that can exist within those tensions. This idea that it seems as though opposing forces create tension that can't coexist. And yet, I would argue that they can. It's all about the balance, right? Another thing that's come up with me and a lot of my clients this week are people who are feeling kind of low energy. It's the change of season. Some people love it. Other people, like me, would prefer to live in eternal summer. So this is a bit of a tricky shift. The idea that on paper everything's fine and there's no crisis, and yet they're feeling kind of low. What many of them tend to do, and I've done this myself, is try to push against how I'm actually feeling, like try to talk myself out of what's actually happening in my body, which doesn't usually work and actually just adds greater tension and more exhaustion, as opposed to leaning in to whatever it is, whether it's feeling low or a little blue or even sad or whatever else. So it's like the whole idea with martial arts where you move with your opponent as they come at you instead of fighting them, you move with them. And I think there's some relevance there.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, fall always holds that tension where it's like it is beautiful. I love the leaves. I love trees kind of inherently. So having that kind of change be broadcast to me every day and it looks different every day, which I really love. And then,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the actual literal and then metaphorical falling of the leaves, right? They're literally falling off the trees.
That's true.
But also, there is that feeling of fall where you're descending into hibernation or certain things dying, that quiet, that frozen change of state that can sometimes feel like a loss or an end. And it literally is an end, right? It's like the end of this cycle of leaves with those trees, and
Yeah.
coming into winter, I think I've made a little bit more peace with my own process with it. Like I used to fight against it, kind of like you said, where it'd be like either I would force myself to be like, this is great. I love fall. It's so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. This sense of like winter's not, like sure it's coming, but it's not really. And now I have
Right.
a more integrated sense of like, yes, this is beautiful. And I also kind of feel sad and I can feel it in my body. I believe that winter is coming. Whereas before I used to
Helpful.
fight it. It's just like, accepting the reality, like there's no beauty of the changing of the leaves without the death in winter, right? These tensions are literally connected.
Yes, I agree with you. The thing that has come up for me in different seasons is that even when things are working the way they're meant to, anytime you move from one situation to another, there is loss, right? So if you move from summer to autumn to winter, every time you shift and transition from one season to a next, you are losing something. And I know that I've mentioned this before, but when my kid went to university, it was one of the most impactful experiences for me around honoring the grief in something that's really positive. And I think we forget about that, right? If somebody dies, we expect to be sad and we expect there to be grief. But any major change, whether it's seasonal or a time of life, carries loss and there is grief there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think we do get a little bit, I wouldn't say confused, or maybe just kind of overlook, like, especially when something's a positive change. Like, if you think about a new job and people think about the excitement or the change that they want or the thing that they're moving towards. And that's great. I think that's often what
Mhm.
fuels a lot of change, moving towards something you want. But there is a lack of acknowledgement of the loss of the thing that you're leaving. And maybe a
Yeah.
lot of it is stuff you don't want anymore, and that's why you're changing. But I'm sure there are things in it that hold some meaning or value to you that you're now saying goodbye to in order to say hello to something else. And that is literally the cycle of how everything works in life, right? The beginning of something is the end of something else, and on it goes. How do you move with those transitions with awareness and grace? I think it's a real, I mean, maybe you don't have to have grace, but I think sometimes grace is helpful in terms of acceptance, right? And appreciating both sides of it, like what you have and then what you're gaining, what you're losing, and that kind of thing.
No, 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 I'm not confused at all. I'm just thinking about what you were saying at the same time. I think grace is optimal. I think it's aspirational for sure. Well, I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I achieve it, sometimes I don't. But I do think it's something to strive for. Absolutely. I like that. It just made me think of the two really different experiences out in the world on the Friday. I don't know if you saw that Blue Jays game that was pretty
No.
awesome. They were gleeful. And then
Yeah.
the second game, not as gleeful, but whatever. It's another game tonight. This is very exciting. But just being out in the world, I was spontaneously out with a friend on the Friday night and we just sat at a local place and I didn't know anybody who was there except for my friend. Everybody started talking to each other. People were super excited. It was all about the game. And that was kind of nice. It was really nice to have that kind of connection. I think the thing that comes up for me as well, though, is that if you're going to support ourselves through transition, it's much more about focusing on process rather than outcome. The game is an obvious example of that, right? We can control our process to a certain extent, but we can't control the outcome. We know winter is coming, but we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what it's going to feel like. What we do know is how it feels right now as we're moving through that transition. Depending on who you are, where you are, and what's going on, that alters the support that each person might need.
You have to respond to the situation you're in at the moment. And so that's going to look like different types of support. If you're feeling lower energy, you could push yourself to keep maintaining a bunch of obligations or whatever, come up with shit to
Right.
do, but or you could just sit in your house and rest a little bit. I think this time of year has the opportunity for that, especially the time between Thanksgiving and the start of the Christmas season, where there starts to be a little bit more expectation or obligations or just family stuff.
Mhm.
But this time of year has the opportunity to be a little bit quieter without something imminently happening besides just the shifting of the season. Your relationship to that and what kind of support you might need through that, whether it is kind of the hibernating or that balance of being out in the world alone or with people or with strangers and kind of finding that sense of community. And it's going to look different for every moment or maybe even every day. Some days
Well,
you
and
might be
that's
like, well, I'm just thinking your example where you're like, yeah, I could be at home alone or I could be home, I could be alone somewhere else. And it's just that's what felt right to you in that moment or good to you in that moment.
well, I'm lucky enough that I have the opportunity and the option to do this. It just occurred to me as you were talking. Maybe the importance here is activating and taking advantage of your choices, whatever they are. I'm aware that I'm quite privileged to be able to just sort of go, I'm just going to go away for the night and hang out by myself, sit in a hotel room, drink wine, watch the Blue Jays game, and have a lovely bath, right? Not everybody has that opportunity, and I'm aware of that. But if we frame all of this from the perspective of whatever life that you're leading, what do you have control over? What are your choices? Many of us do have control over some of the choices that we're making. And so something even as small as I could force myself to continue running as fast as I can and not acknowledge that actually I feel kind of like low energy today, or I can downshift a little bit and really operate at the pace that feels natural today, knowing that everything changes and I'm not going to be here forever. In this moment, this is what I have to offer, and maybe work within those parameters, right? As opposed to operating to some much more arbitrary template or set of expectations that we all sort of carry around with us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's like the that tension that you're talking about between like what your kind of idealized or optimized idea of how
That's
you should be every day or what you should be doing in every moment versus like this is how I actually feel, and the distance between like that and the optimized version, and at different points it's going to be different distances is right. And so being
it.
able to be like, oh, actually, like I'm kind of right here, and that's okay for today or for right now. And moving through your day with that connection to yourself, not forcing yourself to be another way or to be somebody else in this moment.
Or even somebody else that you think you should be. It might not be external, it might be internal, but you know, there are lots of things I should be doing. And instead, this is what I am doing because this is what I've chosen to do. So some of that is prioritizing, I think, as well. And I think that if we're going through a time of transition or loss or darkness or whatever you want to call it, that requires extra energy. So it's understanding where your resources are allocated. I could have been at home doing myriad, you know, responsible things. But instead, I chose to come out here and read my book, which in the long term, it's not amazing for me because I would prefer it to be sunny all the time. This is a good way to recharge my battery, I think. That's one of the things we have some control over, figuring out what we need to do to charge our batteries so that we are better equipped to deal with the external challenges of our lives, whatever they are.
I don't think there's this idea that you shirk all responsibility forever, right? It's like, how do
Not,
you take care of yourself so that you're actually able to meet those responsibilities when you need to? And like you
yeah.
said, that flexibility of choosing how you're going to find that energy for yourself, or realizing how little you have and what can you do to just allow that to be okay for right now without forcing yourself to be like, no, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to push through. I'm going to do everything and feel great about it. I feel like I always get stuck into this whenever I think about that grind mindset, but just like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole capitalist
Yeah.
society that we live in, right? This
Agreed.
machine of capitalism that oozes into so many things that we don't even realize, like into our internal experiences of ourselves and our lives. You have to be productive all the time. You got to be doing the best possible thing. You need to be producing for the world.
And yet, if we all go back to social science or social studies, whatever we had to do in elementary school, we all learned about fallow fields. I don't know how that was even relevant in my life growing up. It wasn't at all. But I remember the word fallow in particular. And I mean, that's the whole point. It goes against exactly what you're saying. Sometimes doing nothing is the productive thing. If you're lucky enough to have the safety and the flexibility to be able to slow down and do nothing, sometimes that's what we need. And I would argue
Yeah.
back to your original point, that's kind of what winter is. On the surface,
Yep.
it doesn't look like there's a lot going on, but clearly there's a lot going on underneath. Being able to recognize when you need to withdraw from the world versus when you need to step into the world is that kind of balance. And it changes day to day or moment to moment. If we are aware of how our bodies feel, we'll know that. And that allows us that little bit of autonomy and the ability to support ourselves differently, depending on
Yeah.
circumstance.
I like that idea of viewing yourself as a garden in that way, right? There's different
I love
phases of a garden, and sometimes it's in bloom and sometimes it's underground, right? It's quiet and not showy, but it's conserving energy so that it can actually sprout and bloom again. And realizing where you are in that cycle and how to support it. And it's like the soil needs different things at different times. It's like when
yes.
it's quiet, you don't need a crap ton of water, right? But when it's in full bloom, then you're watering every day. It's a different analogy for the things you need in your life.
I remember when I was very new at plant husbandry, I would give my houseplants the same amount of water the year round, and I couldn't figure out what was, I mean, this is a long time ago, obviously, I would like to say. And then I was talking to somebody who was actually a what's that word? She studied horticulture. I can't think of the word. It doesn't matter.
Ornithologist?
There
Yeah.
it is. I see, we're not getting it. But anyway, studied horticulture. And she's like, no, they're like dormant. They don't need that much water. Stop overwatering them. And I'm like, oh, it had never occurred to me, which says a lot about me, I think, about pushing and being productive and go hard all the time. I was like, oh, that actually kind of makes sense. So now I don't
Yes.
overwater my plants in the winter.
Absolutely. The more you become attuned with taking care of plants, it's like they actually tell you. You can tell when you're watering them if they're like completely like sucking it up immediately and you're like, oh crap, they needed a lot of water versus just like the water's just kind of like sitting there or just like not going in very quickly. Like the attunement to the plant actually tells you what it needs, right? That's the same with your body.
Yes, I think back to it now and it just sounds so silly. But I was like, well, they're just in my house and all conditions in my house are not different. They're always the same. So they should always need the same thing. Obviously, that's not true either. But even if that were true, the external circumstances have an impact on my little living plants, but their internal reality kind of trumps it. And so even though they're now living in a climate controlled environment, they still have rhythm and they still know that it's winter, even if it's not winter inside my house, right? I feel like there's a pretty good metaphor in there for us being attuned to our lives and not thinking our way through, well, I should be fine. Well, I'm not though. So just do what you are, not what you think you should.
No, absolutely. It's like you said, if we tap into our internal rhythm saying it's time to be quieter, it's okay to be tired and to rest, like that rhythm actually makes sense this time of year.
It does, except for tonight when it's game 3 and I'm going to rouse myself to go and cheer on the team. But you are not wrong. I think you're right. So here's to whatever the actual rhythms. I'd be curious if any listeners want to weigh in. What are your rhythms this time of year? What are your desires? What side of the tension do you find yourself? Do you want to be with people more or do you want to be on your own more? I'd be curious to know how people feel about it.
What are your rhythms? I think that that's a good question to ask yourself this time of year.
What are your rhythms? Okay. And also like and subscribe if you like talking about rhythms and the Blue Jays and all these other things. Go Blue Jays. Thanks, Michelle.
Go Blue Jays. Thanks. Bye.